I'm Greg and I'm a heroin addict.
Hi, Greg.
Okay, so I'll share a little bit of the mess and a little bit of my upbringing. I was born and raised in Salem. My mom was a single mother, also interactive addiction. A lot of chaos in the home until I was about 7, and then she got clean and was introduced to another program of recovery. And it was weird. Like, my dad wasn't around, and I always felt like something was missing, and I didn't have this self-worth that was missing from my life, and so I always, I started lying at a young age. I started manipulating at a young age. I started trying to just fit in any way that I could to get that good enough, and then I was expelled in about 6th grade from one middle school and had to go to the next, and my family ended up moving me out to the country, where I ended up riding dirt bikes and kind of finding my niche of what I wanted to do and something that I could love, and then about 8th grade summer, they left me alone for 2 weeks while they moved to Kaiser, and I stayed out in the country for 2 weeks by myself, staying at a friend's, and I always wouldn't do anything that my friends were doing because I was always worried about if my family would find out, and the consequences of it all. Well, I wouldn't have any if my parents weren't around, and so and in the midst of all that, my mom actually got married and introduced a male figure into my life who started to raise me as his own, and to show me love, who I hated with every ounce of my being, and I wouldn't accept that person into my life as a role model or someone of an authority figure, and so I was a little, angry with everything around me, really, and so they left me or whatever, and I wouldn't have any consequences if I smoked weed or drank, while they were gone. And so I smoked weed for my first time before school, and about a week before school was out, and it was just like this, oh shit, it was just a freeing feeling, and I only did it that one time, and then we moved shortly after that, and I didn't know anyone, and I wasn't sure of my surroundings, you know what I mean, and what happened is I ended up knowing one person from my middle school that had moved to Kaiser also, and they were already into the mix of things, drinking and partying, and so I already had an in, and so I started smoking weed and started drinking and skipping school, and just I felt welcomed and like I was okay within my own skin, and so I started drinking a lot and smoking weed and doing a little bit of coke, and it kind of just progressed, and at 15 I started doing meth, and then it was, I don't live at home, I don't care where I live, my buddy's mom kind of just let us run havoc on her house, and she would be completely enabling us in any way, shape, or form that she could, because she got high too, so whatever hustle we had going on helped her, and so it would just kind of became the norm, and I would avoid my family because they were normal, they were in recovery, and I didn't want anything to do with that, and so I always gravitated towards the destruction and the no supervision, and so I started doing meth, and just it was just like this. And what's weird is I was just waiting on some weed, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get this bag of weed and it'll all be good. Well, it didn't come forever, and so it ended up never coming because I found meth instead, and I was introduced by somebody who was like a role model when I was younger, always looked out for me, and so I trusted him, and he's like, well, just hit this, and I was like, nah, I ain't trying to do none of that, I just want to get that weed, and well, the weed never came, and so I was like, well, the next best thing is at least I'm smoking something, and I never skipped a beat after that, and you know, my family being in recovery kind of, I feel like, screwed me in a way, because they were always trying to save me and always trying to help me get to my bottom. And so I went to my first treatment center at like 17, pending some identity theft charges and some other stuff, you know. And my tweaking got pretty crazy pretty quick, you know, and it just elevated from there. And so they tried to put me in this treatment in Corvallis, and I was there for probably 12 days, and I was like, I could get back to town within like an hour, you know, hitchhiking. Like, I'm out of here, and I don't want this. I'm only here because they fucking brought me here, and I don't want anything to do with it, you know. I just wasn't ready, and so I literally walked out of there with no coat and was back to Salem within about an hour, and in the shed at my homie's house, just flailing about, you know. And it just kind of continued to progress from there, and I never really got in any trouble. I just kind of floated spot to spot and stayed homeless and just went wherever I could. And then when it would get hard enough, my parents would try to help me, you know, and they would sit there and try to save me. And so there again, they're cushioning my bottom. And so I got clean at 19 for about 6 months. And I moved into Oxford. I did all the look good, whatever it was gonna take to for them to financially support me and to get me back on my feet, you know. And that lasted about 5.5 months, and then I started going to parties and thinking that, you know, I could still not do drugs and still kick it with all the same people. And that lasted like 2 weeks. And I'm in Oxford going to parties, and it was me and another individual that were in recovery. Well, we were just abstinent, really. We weren't in recovery. We were just living in recovery houses and doing the same thing that we were. And so one night I'm like, man, I'm about to just get drunk, bro. And he's like, I've been waiting to hear that. And so it was on, you know. And it literally took like 3 days, and we were both kicked out of Oxford. And so I manipulated my way into a person that was supposed to be in recovery's home, and come to find out they were loaded too. And it just kind of went off from there. Like, I acted like I was clean, and I was just hustling a little and still just trying to play that look good. And I would never give to the process, you know. And so I continued to use for a few more years, and then I think I got clean around 24 again. And that at that time it was 24, 25. It was for myself, which it lasted, I think, like 9 months of working a little bit of steps and giving my will over, you know. It always just came down to, I was just gonna write enough just to turn it into my sponsor and be like, oh, I'm on the next step, you know. I never actually dug into anything that was of any meaning, and it was always just surface, and so I could keep my look good going. And so what happened is I got into a relationship, and then I got loaded shortly after, and stayed loaded and for a few more years. I've probably relapsed 5 times, and in that section of recovery, you know, I stayed clean for about 9 months with just going to meetings and doing the minimal on the step work, and I got hurt at work, and they gave me an out. You know, they gave me a prescription for Vicodin, and it was kind of just on from there. And then, you know, I need to go back just a little bit. So at 2021, I was in a relationship with this chick after I got kicked out of the Oxford house, you know, for drinking. I was in a relationship for a few years, and I was able to be a functioning addict for like 2.5 years, and because she would kind of keep me even keeled, and I would still just be tweaking and working, and my bills were paid, and my car was paid, and it was polished, you know, and it was just all the outside shit looked good. So once again, my look good is out there, and about 2.5 years into it, I got her spun out, and it kind of just went haywire from there, and I ended up separating from that relationship, and in the midst of that, I had a spot, and my buddy was kind of going through the same stuff, and he messed with opiates, and I messed with meth, and so we kind of just met in the middle, and he's like, you want to snort some pills? And I'm like, no, I don't fuck with that, you know, and it came down to, well, fuck it, we'll just smoke a bowl and snort some pills, and I actually had never found a freedom like that before in my life. You know, I thought the white dope was just had me free, you know, and the opiates took every piece of angst in my body and just relieved me from myself, and I just felt complete, and so I was off and running from there. I started hustling pills and doing anything I could do to stay down, and so what happened was I was still messing with white, and a friend of mine introduced me to this dude that was plugging heroin, and I didn't really skip a beat from there. I didn't think, for about 8 months I did heroin and didn't know that you could withdraw, and so I kept telling myself, I ain't a junkie, I don't get sick, you know, I ain't a junkie, I don't get sick, and my dude kept asking me, you get sick yet? I'm like, no, I ain't never gonna get sick, you know what I mean, I ain't a junkie, you know, and what happened is he got raided and I got sick, and I never saw a low like that before in my life. And I started robbing and pillaging, and I thought I was scandalous before, you know, and I just started pillaging everything and everyone, and it didn't matter who you were, I was trying to get over on you, you know, and so that lasted till, shit, I had, so 29 in jail, so about 27. At 27, I had about 14 months clean, and I had been working, and I was working steps, and I was doing everything that was suggested, and I was actually working steps, and I was involved when I could be, but I put my work in before all, and I traveled all over from here to North Carolina for about mostly the 14 months that I was clean. You know, I would be in town, and I'd be involved in the program, and then I'd go back to work, and the program wouldn't exist. I would put my step work away, and I would just be one of the guys at work. And what happened is I was in North Carolina, and we went to the bar almost every night and had steaks, you know, and they would drink, and I would just chill and drink soda, and I just felt like I could drink one night, and I was like, fuck it, one drink ain't gonna hurt, you know, I'll be all right. And what happened is I drank every night after that, and it was cool, you know what I mean? Like, there was no consequence from it, everything was good. I was just working and hungover. I was a little hungover the next day, you know, it was a little rough. And you know, I came back from North Carolina, and we drove, and so I had worked for a while and drove, and so I was running off a lack of sleep, and I went out of town again for another 10 days. Came home, slept in my bed for one night, and went back to work. And what happened is I came home after that 10-day run and had breakfast with 2 people in recovery, and you know, it was weird how it worked, because I had no thought of getting loaded or using, you know, I just been drinking on the road, and that's funny. I had been drinking on the road, and I ran into a buddy, you know, and he's like, hey, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm going back to my spot. He's like, well, can I slide through? I'm like, yeah, let's, you know, come over. And that's all it took, was just me allowing him, and knowing that he was coming over. I was already loaded, and I was already back out, you know, and so as soon as he showed up, he's like, what have you been doing? I'm like, working my ass off, and I think it's time for a vacation. And that's literally what I told him, and I was just like, you know, I was thinking about it, and it took a little while for him to get back with some dark, and there was no thought process about it. There was no, like, regrets that I had him at my house. There was no, like, oh, I probably shouldn't do this. It was just like I had already made that conscious decision that I was done, you know? And so I got loaded that day, and it took about 5 days of just playing with it to go right back to shooting. And try to keep my look good once again for as long as I could. And I continued to go to meetings, and I continued to go to work to the best of my ability, being strung out. And then there came a point where I was just dangerous to not only myself but my coworkers. And it's one thing for me to risk my own life at work, but when I start endangering other people that are trying to feed their family, I was like, I probably shouldn't come to work anymore. And so I called my boss and I was like, hey man, I'm pretty fucked up, and I think I'm gonna have to take a little while off to straighten some shit out, And that was probably one of the worst things that I could do, because then I had free time, I had money, and it was just over from there. And I stayed loaded for just under a year, running around, hustling. I was also in a relationship with someone that was not clean, and I had been in that relationship with them since I had about 8 months in recovery, thinking that it would work and that I could save them. And what ended up happening is I just joined them, and I stayed loaded for a while, and it got pretty like I've done a lot of stuff, and I've had a lot of damage and chaos around me, and this was probably the worst, people that I was caring about were overdosing, and from the dope that I was giving them, and it was just like this. I was to this point where I was just tired of living, and I couldn't see a way out, and my girl had just like tried to kill herself with Xanny bars and dark, and I'm just like, this is what it's come to. Like, this is what I signed up for, and I couldn't really take it anymore, and I couldn't see getting clean either, and so I tried to take my life with a couple units of with the heroin that I've been selling that is killing people, and it just didn't work for me that day, and I'm not real sure how or why, but I was pretty pissed off about it, and I didn't skip a beat, I didn't slow down, I just continued on like, fuck it, I'm just supposed to be a miserable junkie, and my family once again tried to get me to. They didn't try. I went, but I left. They offered me a ride to California to go to this year-long treatment place, and I got there, and it was like this church-based. I don't want to talk shit, but I was like, fuck you guys. This is way too religious for me. Like I'm sitting here trying to kick dope, and you guys are talking about Jesus, and I'm fucking out. And so I lasted about 48 hours, and it was weird because like I was talking to my boy as we were driving up there, and everything was good, and nothing seemed different, and as soon as I left that place in California, I turned on my phone and it was already ringing, and it was the homicide detectives from Salem saying that they needed to speak to me because I was one of the last people seen with one of my close friends before he was shot down out in Kaiser, and I was already in an emotional state, withdrawing, and it just hit me like a ton of fucking bricks, and so I was like, well, that's why I left there then, and I need to go home and go to that funeral, and this is gonna keep me clean, and it didn't do nothing but make it worse, and I came back to I called I talked to the detective, and she's like, where are you? I'm like, nowhere. And they're like, do you know anything about this? I'm like, no, you know what I mean? Like, and she's like, well, I know how your guys' world works, and you probably ain't gonna tell me anything anyways, and if you do have somebody to talk to, you should probably talk to them, because I know this is rough. And I was just like, click, and I just broke down. I'm in the middle of fucking nowhere in California with nobody that I know, and I just cried, and waited for the Greyhound, and I took the Greyhound. First I found some meth, and I took the Greyhound back to Salem, and I was just losing my mind the whole way home, you know what I mean? I'm spun out on a bus, just sitting there like losing my mind, and I was just sick, and I was so tired, but I just couldn't, I couldn't get away, I couldn't get away from myself. I was my own worst enemy, and so I took that Greyhound home, and my pops picked me up, and I already had dope lined up before I even hit town, and telling them that I'm gonna kick, and I went outside, smoked a cigarette, plugged, and was loaded again, you know. And you know, I had this plan that I was gonna turn myself into Albany because I already had warrants for some stuff that I had gotten into out there, and that was my plan, was to go to this funeral, show my boy the respect, and turn myself in. And about 3/4 way through that funeral, I was like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. There's cops in here, and I'm not turning myself in. That's crazy. Like, who does that, you know? And so I ran around for another month and a half, and you know, it was weird. Like, I'm not really sure why it happened or how it happened that way, but I had plans to go somewhere, and I felt just too fucked up to go to that certain place, and I got a ride over to my safe spot, and you know, I feel like it all just kind of worked out the way it did for a reason, because my homeboy was raided on some controlled buys, and I was just there, and so they caught me with a little bit of dope, and they gave me a couple delivery charges, and I sat in jail for a month and a half, and then was transferred and was given an opportunity to do drug court. Well, drug court wouldn't accept me because I already had pending charges in Albany, so I had to sit in jail for a little longer, and which I was pissed about at the time, you know, because like, who the fuck wants to sit in county jail? And you know, they had me watch drug court a few weeks in a row, and so I sat in jail a little longer, and then finally they're like, okay, well, if you want to do drug court, then we'll lift your hold out here, and you can get transferred out there and figure that out, and then come back here. And so they released that hold, and I was transferred to Albany, and they kept me for about one evening, and released me, and I went straight to a meeting the day I got out, and I've been in recovery ever since that day. And I went to jail the 4th of March, and so my clean date is 3/5/16. I have a sponsor, I have a sponsee, I have a home group, and I have a service position that I'm active in, and I'm in the middle of a 11th step right now, and walking through a 3rd step with a sponsee. And you know, I wasn't too sure about drug court because, you know, like my family, my dad's sitting there telling me, just go to prison, bro, you'll be better off. And like, literally, I called him, I'm like, hey, I might do this drug court, and he's like, just go to prison. Like, just go to prison, you're gonna be fine. Go to prison, we know people in there, you're gonna be cool. Like, just go to prison. Drug court, you're gonna be fucked. You can't do that. You can't do it. And I was like, fuck you. Like, I can do that shit, and I'm gonna. And I'm not sure if he was trying to play a trick on me or what the deal was, but I just don't think he had any more faith left in him, you know, and in me. And because I had drug him through the ringer since he met me, you know. There was probably a couple good years in there where I was a decent kid, and so I drugged this man through the ringer, and but he told me just go to prison. I was like, no, fuck that. I don't want to just take the time, you know. And I was like, I'm too pretty for that shit. I ain't going to prison. and so, you know, I've been in drug court, and I've gotten involved in step work and of service, and done everything they've asked, you know. And I feel like that it's only as hard as I make it. And if I just continue on this process of willingness with my higher power, which the program has given me, it's not hard at all, you know what I mean? I can just walk through that program with ease, and I've been able to, because I think I've been in drug court for 10 months and haven't had any fucking hiccups yet, because there's still time, you know. But recovery for me has been a lot different this time, because I came in here with this desperation. And you know, I always had the desperation when I came out of a rut, you know what I mean? But it just wasn't like sunk to my core. And so quickly it got right back to that look good, and like, fuck, I did this shit, and I'm doing this shit, you know. And today, you know, I walk within the program and with the people, and they carry me through everything that I have to walk through today. And I don't have to do anything alone unless I choose to. And you know, the steps have been this bitter fucking sweet process You know, I'd like to say it's just been fucking great, but some of the shit that I have to walk through because of my past is just is emotional. It's fucking just greatly freeing at the same time, you know. But it takes work to get the freedom, you know, that's promised in the book and in the literature. And you know, I think the hardest part was making amends to my mom, and like acknowledging that I fucking just peeled her for whatever I could, whenever I could, and like taking the responsibility for my actions for once, you know. And I've never really had any consequences, other than like people being disappointed in me. But I feel like the actual charges that I took, you know, have been a pretty big motivator to do something different. And so when I got back to the rooms, you know, my sponsor was like, I already had a sponsor, and he stayed my sponsor while I was loaded. And so when I got back, I feel like, you know, he's like, hey, whenever you're ready to do something different, let me know, we can work the steps. And I was like, well, fuck, I guess, you know, we should just start now. And what do you want me to do, you know? And so I jumped in just hungry for something different. And I've been able to set my look good aside for the most part, and be humble. Like when being asked to share, like I fucking am a wreck. I was tripping last night because somebody reminded me, like, hey, you have to speak tomorrow. Good luck speaking tomorrow. And I'm like, thanks for fucking reminding me. Like I could have went until tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like now it's right before bed, and I'm obsessing on what I'm gonna say and how I'm gonna say it. And my look good and my ego is just raging, like, oh, you better just handle this, you know, and say it this way. And it's like I sat down in that back room before I came out here, and I prayed to my higher power of my choosing, and asked for His will to flow through me as I speak, you know, because it's not really, it's my story, but it's not my message. It's the message of the program, you know, and what's been given to me. And I only had to do a little bit of work to obtain it, and I only have to do a little bit of work to keep it. But I do have to do that work on a regular basis, you know, because I'm quick to forget, and I'll forget all the bad things that have happened, and I'll start to just reminisce on one little good thing that happened in my addiction, and I'll be loaded before I know it, you know. And so I feel like the persistence of remembering where I come from today has allowed me some freedom. And you know, I like that this meeting is here, because we actually started a HA meeting one time, and a couple years ago, and there was like 6 of us that regularly attended it, and then we all got loaded, and because we were just showing up just to show up, you know, and never really did the work. And that meeting died off, and then Jessica showed up and was like, hey, I'm gonna start an HA meeting. And then she's kind of drugged me into going to Portland and meeting with some other people and stepping outside of my comfort zone, and then asking me to speak, you know. Normally my first answer is no, and or a lie, and I have to like talk to my God and work that out, you know, and be like, okay, maybe I should do this, or maybe I should actually tell them the truth, you know. And because this program is actually just all about practice, because all the shit that I've done in my addiction has trained my brain to think one way and act another, you know. And so when she asked me, I was like, oh shit, I should just say no, you know. But my instant reaction was, yeah, not this month, but next month, you know. And I didn't want to speak until I had over a year clean, because I was asked to speak when I had 6 months, and I just felt like having a little bit of clean time and a little more clarity, and the pump from the convention that we went to get me through, you know, to share a solid message of recovery. And I don't know, I was a little nervous before I came up here, but I don't think I'm sweating as much as I thought I would, so that's cool. And I'd just like to acknowledge the birthdays, you know. The newcomers, welcome, you know. There's relief if you want it, you know. You just have to do a little bit of work to get it. And there's plenty of willing men and women that'll show you the way. Congratulations to you guys on your guys' year, man. That's a big deal. And hopefully that you guys can continue to reap the benefits that this program offers. And I'm just blessed to be a part of this group and what I shared for like 24 minutes. And just having an opportunity to share a message of recovery. And with that, I'll take one more 24.
Thanks, Greg.